fun. We're having fun.
We are.
Mitchell gets a long movie, and it's makes you question everything. And I really like that. No more romantic crap. No more fake blood crap from Italians.
What?
I don't care anymore. I'm done. Mitchell, I've got my ivory tower. Episode 71, I think. Apocalypse Now.
Mhm.
We're joined by Zach and Christian.
Hello.
Oh,
Say
hi.
hi. It is a 1979 American epic psychological war film thingy, directed and produced by Francis Ford Coppola, obviously known for Bram Stoker's Dracula, best film of all time. The film follows a river journey from South Vietnam into Cambodia, undertaken by Captain Willard Martin Sheen, known for the Final Countdown, obviously, who is on a secret mission to assassinate Colonel Kurtz. Marlon Brando, known for Jor-El in 1978 Superman, obviously.
Yes.
Who's a renegade Army Special Forces officer accused of murder and who is presumed insane. The film is very loosely based on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. 14-year-old Lawrence Fishburne out here is Tyrone Mr. Clean Miller. Robert Duvall is Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore. Frederick Forrest is Benjamin J. Chef Hicks. I almost said Chef. Just that's how much sleep. All right. Albert Hall is Chief Petty Officer Phillips. Dennis Hopper, who's the Cool Hand Luke guy.
Yeah.
I forget what his name is. As a photojournalist. Harrison Ford is Colonel G. Lucas. Ha ha. What did you think of the film?
Oh my gosh.
Oh wow,
dude.
yeah.
I swear I never noticed that.
Yeah.
Well, I know Christian has kind of fallen into a spiral with this movie, so I'm gonna get my thoughts out of the way because I think this is gonna be one of those episodes where I struggle to get a word in.
Yes.
But I was and am amazed by this film. I had seen this before, but this is one of those movies that I saw as like, oh, this is a movie people like, before I really knew anything about movies. And now, as someone who makes films and studies films and does direct things and consider themselves a director, this movie constantly rode the edge of amazing me and giving me a heart attack. Because every single shot in this movie, you think, my God, they had to coordinate and direct and possibly reshoot multiple times. All of that. I want to die. This movie is just watching Apocalypse Now. The performances are amazing. The cinematography by Vittorio Storaro is beautiful, like astonishing. One of the greatest cinematographers of all time. Basically every movie he worked on looks great. This is probably one of the best. Basically everything about this movie works. I'm talking about the theatrical cut. I think Reddix and the final cut have their issues. I think those are examples of like the scenes that they put back into those versions are why we have deleted scenes sections on a DVD and not 2 additional versions of a movie. But watching the theatrical cut of this movie, at least for me, it's like looking at the pyramids and going, my goodness, how do they make that?
Aliens.
Apocalypse Now is the 8th wonder of the world, and if someone told me that it took aliens to make it, I would believe them. 5 out of 5. It's pretty brilliant, and on a rewatch, which will probably happen soon because I have to buy this movie sooner or later, it might edge Cloud Atlas out of my top 4 on Letterboxd.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yes.
That has Tom Hanks and stuff.
It does, yes. That's not how I would probably describe it, but it does have Tom Hanks and stuff.
Oh gosh, I don't even know where to start, but we were tasked with watching the theatrical cut of this, as
Yes.
Zach has said.
That was the assignment.
And I did that, and then I watched the Redux, and then I watched a lot of the special features, and then I watched the Hearts of Darkness documentary about the making, and then I watched the final cut, and I did all of that in the span of maybe just over 24 hours.
Yeah, Christian hasn't slept. He's like Dennis Hopper's character.
Yeah.
Francis Ford Coppola, he's a big man. He's a great man.
What are they going to say about when he was gone? He was kind, man. He was a wise man. Oh, I love that scene, man. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Yeah, I love this. I think it's basically perfect. Like Zach said, I think just about everything works. And I mean, I can talk about the differences between the cuts if you want me to, but I certainly agree that the theatrical cut is the best. And it's a wonder that this was made, that it was seen through to the end by Coppola and everyone else. And it's totally a 5 out of 5 for me. I am tempted to call this the best movie I have had to watch for the podcast. I think for me it's probably either this or Casablanca, and hard to compare. But I mean, this is just unbelievable. And I don't often recommend purchasing things on this platform, but right now you can get the 4K Blu-ray and digital of all 3 cuts, and the Blu-ray for the documentary, which is also fantastic, for $14 on Amazon. So
is that
go watch this, please.
Is that on sale right now, or is that the permanent pricing?
Yeah, it's on sale.
Okay, all right.
I think it's typically $30, but it was 40th
I better
anniversary,
sweep
which
in
was
then.
a couple years ago. Yeah, no, you should. Oh gosh, it's so good that I can't even properly gather my thoughts to describe why. But the performances are all really, really great and individual. There were a lot of deeply personal issues that a lot of these people face, which you see in detail in the documentary. I mean, Coppola literally contemplates suicide at one point. Martin Sheen has a very serious heart attack, and when Marlon Brando shows up, he's out of shape, and he didn't read Heart of Darkness like Coppola told him to, and they spend a long time figuring out the dialogue to a point where Brando is satisfied with it, but it's really evident that he hasn't done the work Coppola wants him to do. And this is just one of those works where you realize every movie and every project, but especially one as massive in scale as this one, is at some point a bizarrely random collection of personalities and talents and warring viewpoints, and a lot of people that are bringing some version of themselves to this. And it's basically a miracle that all of those elements came together to work the way they did, when everyone and their character was going through hell.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I almost gave the documentary a 5 too. I gave a 4.5 to the documentary, but I highly recommend it to everyone after watching the theatrical. And I would probably recommend watching the Redux at some point if you're impressed by the theatrical, even though I think the theatrical is the best version.
I think, if only for a lesson on how editing can drastically change the tone and feel and pace of scenes and segments of a movie, it's worth watching. I'm going to keep calling it the Redux cut, because there is a bunch of stuff put back, 45 minutes of additional footage in that cut, that even though I don't think it needs to be there, it does inform characters and makes you feel a different way about a lot of different things that happen throughout the kind of conclusion of the film as well.
Yeah, and there are parts of the Redux that I really like, and the final cut was something Coppola put together recently, and he sort of described it as a compromise between the theatrical and the Redux, but I found that it kept the parts of the Redux that I liked the least. Is it fine that I'm getting into this now, Michelle? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I thank you for lending me your theatrical version, Christian.
Yeah, happy to.
Well,
come on, IMDb. Help me here.
See, the thing that I think is confusing about, and I feel like we're kind of taking over this episode right now, but the thing that I think is confusing about the fact that the Redux cut and the final cut is usually, when you're going to put that kind of thing out, you put it out because the filmmaker never got to release, their version of the film. They never got to release what they saw in it. The studio didn't give them final cut or something like that. But as far as I know, and at this point I think you know more about the production of this movie than I do, Christian, but as far as I know, upon initial release, Coppola had Final Cut. So to me, like the Red X version, the Final Cut feels more like a man kind of becoming obsessed with his own back catalog and desperately tinkering with things than it does an artist realizing his vision. Like sort of, I mean, it was gonna come up. The Star Wars special editions. Like, I don't think it's as egregious as that, but it feels more like that to me than, like, the final cut of Blade Runner, where you get the feeling that Ridley Scott is finally getting to finish those parts of the movie he always wanted to finish, but didn't have the time or money to do when it was first made.
Yeah, I mean, Coppola describes it as the theatrical cut was something he put together. It wasn't something where the studio was like, you have to do X, but he had... What did they said it was like over 1 million feet of film. He shot a ridiculous amount of stuff in that time. So it took him like 2 years to edit it together. And he said that he was very conscious of like the weirder parts of it. I don't even think the Redux is that weird or impressionistic by comparison to the theatrical. I just think it's longer. But he sort of described it as very consciously keeping in the elements that would work for the most people and trying to make the most like crowd pleasing, would adapt to audiences best, which is, you know, I think it's a shame that that's almost treated like heresy, because I think it worked. Yeah. I think sometimes, you know, when you're a creative making all of this stuff, when you cut something, it's not because you're not cutting it because it's bad. You're cutting it because it's not as 5 out of 5 freaking fantastic perfect as everything else is, you know.
I also feel like I'm gonna steal the reins from you because this is mine.
That we stole from you. Yeah.
No, give me that. All right. So, I feel based on my assumptions, because I've only seen the theatrical cut, it seems like there's a lot that is preserved in the confines of the theatrical editing, and I feel like any real attempt to go outside of it. If it either is just going to drag on the points that were already made, or it's just going to be kind of foraying into a specific like layer of the multi-layered pound cake or whatever this is.
Yeah.
I like pound cake, and I don't know. I think. Can I give my opinion now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good.
12 minutes into the episode.
Anyway, yes. I had never seen this before. Believe it or not, this is a huge hole in my history. I'm supposed to be the freaking war film guy. I betrayed my brethren of the cult. And I would say this is like definitely one of the most fantastic feats of filmmaking in terms of a horror / war film. And I call it that because it basically is a psychological horror.
Yeah.
And it's really like intriguing coming off of our Nick Cage fest. Because with Mandy, because they could have very easily gone into like a psychedelic thing or kind of drawn out a lot of these like interpretive sequences and like these, you know, the kind of like underlying hysteria with Vietnam and like the history and trying to be historically accurate, and it does like versions of that in its own way. Like it does all of those things to some extent, but it knows to focus on the very big philosophical themes, to focus on the really hard-hitting, deep thought, like soul-wrenching ideas. And I think it does wonders for the film. It really makes the film like a permanent like part of not just American culture, but of like human culture, of like cinematic the cinematic experience to begin with.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's really I can't think of any real other way to put it. And I mean, Vietnam's the by far the most perfect backdrop for any of this. And I think the casting, we'll talk about that in a bit, is basically second to none. But I mean, you just feel like, even not knowing like the how the intricacies of production and everything and how certain shots are set up, it just feels real. Like it feels real in the spiritual sense and in the literal sense in a lot of ways. And it's just, you know, it's really something you have to experience, and you better be in at least a minorly good mood to see this, because it's going to take away some of your humanity.
Yeah.
and it's
for
going to
sure.
make you give it 5 stars. So, really not a whole lot else to say about that. But production problems included everything Christian freaking said.
Yeah.
So now Christian is stealing my thunder. There's expensive
sorry.
sets destroyed by severe weather. Brando is fat and sad.
Yes.
And Sheen is having breakdowns and nearly has a freaking near fatal heart attack on location. When photography was finally finished, the release was postponed several times. It was edited over 1 million feet of film. The Philippines had no professional film laboratories at the time, meaning that raw camera negatives had to be shipped to the U.S. to be processed. So the entire movie was shot blind. Coppola never saw a shot on film until after returning to California. So you guys can talk about the production. Leave me out of it.
Cow. Well, can I just add to that list? I think one of the
Yes.
craziest things is there's a literal civil war being fought in the Philippines while they were
Yes.
filming this.
Yeah.
And they had a private contract with the Philippine government to use some of their helicopters. And mid-shoot, 5 of their helicopters got called away to fly into a literal freaking battle. And all Coppola could do was just stand there and be like, what? You're taking away 5 of the copies? And it's unbelievable. I mean, you can't write this stuff. It's the hardships they faced cannot be understated. Really cannot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so jumping back a little bit to a smaller thing than the helicopters, but I am glad you mentioned Mandy, Mitchell, because I do think that Mandy owes a lot to Apocalypse Now in like its editing, in its style. A lot of what Mandy is going for is pretty much Apocalypse Now if you added a little bit more LSD.
Yeah, basically.
And you took out the doors, weirdly.
Yeah.
I think, like Christian was saying, this was plagued by so many production issues, but it's maybe the ultimate example of a lightning in a bottle film, where everybody's issues and everybody's personalities and all the issues that they encountered on set, it happened at just the right moment, so that everything combined to come out with a perfect movie. I think if you tried to make this movie a year later or a year earlier with all of the same people and with the same situation, it wouldn't have happened. It's
2 years earlier, Star Wars. Nope.
Yeah, it's that which is actually an interesting point. I was going to mention this.
Yeah.
For the longest time, Apocalypse Now was going to be a George Lucas film. It was going to be his next project after Star Wars, and he was going to shoot it like really low budget on 16 millimeter. He was going to use a type of film stock that they used during like news coverage of Vietnam, and he was going to make it this like scrappy little indie film. And then because of Star Wars, he had to give it up. And Coppola was like, well, I guess I'll make this thing. So this movie that he wasn't even meant to direct almost killed him. Yeah, which I do almost think is a shame, because I don't think George Lucas's Apocalypse Now would have been as good as Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. But I think early George Lucas is a filmmaker and an artist with a lot of interesting ideas that were kind of quashed by Star Wars. Star Wars made him extremely rich, but it also, in a way, sort of burdened him with this like creative empire that he had to handle and had to put kind of all his other aspirations on hold for. So a lot of the movies that I think he could have made didn't really end up getting made because he was supervising Star Wars or dealing with finance rights, and that's a bit of a simplification of an oversimplification. But like, he didn't get to make Apocalypse Now because of Star Wars, and I think that's just one small example of like how the cinematic landscape could have been very different if Star Wars hadn't happened. But also Brando. I think Brando is a great example of like. Marlon Brando, call it just being a diva, call it being a dedicated actor, whatever. Toward the end of his career, he got into this thing where he didn't want to memorize lines because he thought that it made his performance like overly structured and unnatural. Al Pacino talks about how when he worked on The Godfather, another Coppola film, with Marlon Brando, he was so excited to meet Marlon Brando because Marlon Brando is like an actor's hero. He was really excited to meet him and talk about his methods, and then day one, a PA came up and started taping Marlon Brando's lines to Al Pacino's chest so that in a scene where Marlon Brando is on the other side of the table talking to him, he could read his lines off of Al Pacino's costume.
Classic. Classic.
So he like a lot of the monologues in this, I have heard Brando just went, okay, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna speak for a while, and you're gonna film it, and then just kind of what he came up with ended up being these monologues, and it's great, but like again, it's that like capturing just the right moment. I'm sure like 80% of the stuff that Brando said in those sessions was utter garbling nonsense, and most of it probably had nothing to do with the lines, but then, you know, they picked just the right material. They picked stuff like, we train these boys to drop fire on people, but their commanding officers will not let them write fuck on their aircraft because it is obscene, which is like the bomb that the movie drops in the third act, where you go, whoa, I'm a different person now.
That was a nice Yoda reaction there, Zach.
Wow.
I will say they do show some of the other improvisation in the documentary, and it's like a lot of it is not just like tangential and non sequitur. It's just straight up awful, like really, really bad stuff. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you think of, they spent 2 weeks improvising that stuff, and one of the, however, probably a couple hundred takes they did is the one that worked. You know, it is totally lightning in the bottle. And I have had quite a lot of experience, not quite a lot, but I've seen what are the two Kazan films that Brando's in that he's more famous for, A Streetcar and Waterfront.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he's so totally different in those. He's young, he's fit, I mean, you get this, I understand what he means when he says he doesn't want to memorize his lines, because a lot of what he's doing in those films is so like form-based. Mm-hmm. But it's not that his performance is bad because of that. It's just a different style, I would say. And here he is just, I think my biggest issue with the other cuts is that they both kind of ruin Kurtz. But in the theatrical, he is death. He is death. And you like almost never see his face. And when you do see his face, the rest of him is shadow. Yeah. And by the end of the film, Willard has to become death to triumph and over him, and it's like so primal, and it's perfect, man. It's a perfect movie.
Yeah, and like the era correct face paint, I'm like, that's era correct face paint.
That's really cool. I didn't know that.
And yeah, and no, I mean, it's just there's no, it's so hard to describe. Like the scale is so like not real, but it's so believable at the same time. Like the one super dreamlike sequence when they're playing like borderline circus music, and like all the different soldiers instantly have different personalities. You instantly feel like they're real people. You like everything when he's like, "Who's your commanding officer? Do you know who your commanding officer is?" He's like, yes.
"Aren't you?" Yeah.
And then it goes away.
Yeah.
And that. Well, yeah, right. And like it's just, and he just instantly kills that one guy that's like taunting them or whatever over the that's just like, I don't know. It's so hard to describe. Like it doesn't feel like, oh, it's just a dreamlike sequence. Like you just can't categorize any of these scenes. Like the one boat sequence almost felt like it could have fell into a cliche. And while he's listening to the tape, like that was so ingenious. That's such an ingenious scene.
Yeah.
Like that was probably the most effectual one for me, honestly, besides obviously Kurtz's scenes and everything. But that was like, it was so perfectly timed, and every shot was perfectly like edited together where it felt like it was a real sequence, like he actually just freaking died, like listening to his family and everything. It was like, it's stuff like that. I mean, it just feels so real, but it feels like it's just a part of a larger narrative, and it's so like seamless. Like you could just feel like you could watch hours of it. Like it's just like you felt like that boat sequence could just go on forever. It's just like in Heart of Darkness, where you just feel like the jungle like just goes on forever, and you know that there's like a path, you know that there's a mission, you know that there's enemies, but all of it just ends up not mattering. And it's just amazing how so quickly that can be like sleight of handed out of all of your senses. And it's just like all of a sudden you're not smelling this or seeing this or hearing this anymore. Like even with the Ride of the Valkyries sequence going on the beach, instant, just no sound, and you just hear the kids like scrambling, and all the women taking all the kids in, and all the guys getting together and getting everything armed up, and I mean, it's just like impeccable. Like I'm not usually this speechless about something like this, but it's just like it's crazy. Like I just can't. I'm looking so hard. Like is this cheesy, or is this like cliche, or is this fall into like a war thing? I mean, there's just nothing. But so most of the dialogue was replaced in post-production because of extraneous noise, such as helicopters. Obviously, was a big thing, which left many scenes with unusable audio. Also, Coppola went to UCLA Film School with all the members of the Doors, including Jim Morrison, who agreed to let Coppola use the master recordings of their music for his Vietnam film.
Wow. Okay.
Nice.
The 5.5 hour early assembly cut of the movie was scored entirely using songs by the Doors for the actual score is created. So, talking about the score and the sound design.
I want to see that assembly cut so bad.
Well, there are leaks of that assembly cut, I think, and it's like long. Like it would take you like a literal day to watch the whole thing. But I think the soundtrack in this is so brilliant, and I think it lends itself to scenes perfectly, which ties back into the editing and like the pacing. I think it's a small thing. But I think it's the Redux cut that I think makes a big mistake in moving the I can't get no satisfaction scene. Because in the theatrical cut, that scene is like it's fun, it's peppy. Like having that song on the soundtrack is like a great representation of the era and a representation of Vietnam without just using Creedence Clearwater Revival, which like every movie does now. But
the incessant use of Creedence Clearwater Revival, Glenn Quagmire.
But at the same time, that scene in the theatrical cut is a real establishment of these guys aren't ready for this. And the way that they move that in the Redux cut, just it feels like the wrong place to put that scene in that cut, at least to me. Where this, it's like they're entering the mouth of this vast tunnel that they have no idea what is at the other side of it, and they clearly don't care, but they should, and you know they should, and yet they're just listening to the Rolling Stones while they sail into it. And in the other cut, it's just kind of like, we're in the middle of the tunnel, but we're going to listen to the Rolling Stones anyway. It doesn't work as well for me. But yeah, and then, I mean, the use of the end at the beginning and the end it just works brilliantly.
Perfect.
When did Jim Morrison agree to let them use those tracks? Because I think by the time this movie came out, he would have been dead. I think.
Really?
So I think I'm not. I listened to the Doors a long time ago. Well, a long time, like a year ago. So I'm not as brushed up on Jim Morrison as I was at the time. But I think this movie came out in '79.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if he went to school with the other band members, perhaps he got permission.
Oh,
from the
sure.
other band members.
My thought is just that like. It's bizarre to think that this movie was in production for so long that Jim Morrison gave them permission to use a song, and by the time they actually used it, he was dead. Like it's a very it shows what's like a burden of dreams this whole production was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or nightmares.
The other, yes, totally. None of this is. It's all a nightmare. The other soundtrack that is so perfect is the Wagner that that Kilgore plays when they're flying into battle, which has so many more layers of like hypocrisy and discomfort because Wagner was promoted as one of Hitler's favorite composers, and Wagner himself has published some anti-Semitic writings. So there's definitely some like. You know, I have no idea.
I'm thinking me and Coppola on the same.
But it's like once we're taken into the war zone, it's kind of like, I mean, until we get to Kurtz, I think the idea is that everyone is kind of in this hell and is both guilty of and subject to doing the same horrible things, and there's just no way out of it for anyone. And it's not even that it's like any one person's fault. It's just that it's all horrible. And I think the music just... One of the shots that's lingering with me is when one of the copters land and the guy's just like, I'm not going! Yeah. I'm not going! Yeah. And the guy pulls him out. Go! And I was just glancing at the credits. I can't find whoever was the voice actor for this, but whoever plays Clean's mom on that tape is so good. Yeah. Because it's so, like... conversational. You can feel how heartfelt and deeply thought it is, but it's also like it's got a brand of like casual comfort to it, and it's totally emotional and personal, but it's not like over the top. It's just perfect.
But
sorry.
I like how and this may be an aspect of like the actress reading the script as they're recording her, but I like how it seems the way that she's reading it, like she wasn't sure what to say, so she wrote it out ahead of time because she was worried she would like and you really get that feel despite the emotion still being there, like you mentioned. Like we were all waiting for you to come home, your dad, your mom, and it's just it has that like listing feel without that emotion like not being there.
And it doesn't just like hold the cut on Fishburne's body or anything.
Yeah.
Like it like keeps going to the different reactions, and like just everything is just so dynamic. Like even the Ride of the Valkyries is like you hear different versions of the same song because it's coming from the helicopter. You hear it with the helicopter, and you hear it like from the perspective of the ground. You hear it slowly coming in, and with the crashing of the waves, and it's just everything just feels so like flowy and terrible at the same time, and definitely like one of the more iconic scenes. But one of the things that the synthesizers are fantastically used, and especially for like scene transitions, and you feel it's not just a single like tone either. Like it things are kind of awry and things are like trying to stay together, but then you kind of like hit some really weird lows and like some really weird highs, and it's just it's not just complete chaos either. It's like a controlled chaos, and a lot of that really works. The score in general really works with a lot of like the action sequences, which are barely like the action sequences are not really that notable. They're not really action sequences. They're kind of just people dying and things exploding, which is pretty much what like brass tacks what war is. So. And I think it's perfectly integrated. Another reason why I felt this was more like a psychological horror, if anything, and that also just gets accentuated with the tribal music towards the end, with the temple and all of that kind of picking up, and I think that is a perfect conclusion. And I don't know, even the scenes without any of that, I think the rotary wing sounds are like some of the best like used, especially in the intro. Like you already felt like, wow, like clearly they put a lot of thought into like mixing this and making sure the score matches perfectly with what's going on. I think there's like one riff or something that's matched. I think it might be a synth or something that's matched with the Hueys coming in, and it's like I felt like I know they're not matching this perfectly, but they're just trying to integrate everything, and it just felt like everything was so well orchestrated and very thought out, and that never really ends, honestly. And even with the dead moments and Sheen's narration, or we'll talk about how that could also not be Sheen's narration.
Oh.
But if you did not know, did you know, Zach? I bet you didn't.
I did not know.
I bet Zach didn't know. I bet Christian didn't know. I didn't even want to know if he knows.
I didn't. Okay, I'll be honest. I knew like 3 minutes ago because I was scouring Letterboxd to see who Queen's mom was,
no
and instead I found the other thing.
No cheating. Okay, so we talked about Brando being bad and not knowing anything. It was funny how they kept the camera away for his like massive belly and everything. Yeah, which is interesting. I didn't even notice that at all. And he improvised an 18-minute dialogue, and only 2 of the minutes of it were actually used. Which is interesting. So they literally filmed him for 18 minutes.
That's a lot of film.
That's
a lot of money, literally just burned up.
Also, didn't they pay him like $1 million a week?
Yeah.
Like, he was the top billed, even though obviously Sheen is the lead actor. He's the top billed, and this is what he brought to the production. Hi.
And the first scene, which this blew my mind, Martin Sheen was completely drunk and actually like pissed off in the first scene. And it was pretty much it was entirely unscripted and basically entirely improvised because he was so mad at Coppola. Joe Estevez, Sheen's brother, had to narrate for many of Sheen's lines and was even used as a stand-in after Sheen's heart attack.
Wow.
So my last discussion concerns the performances.
Well, I do think I'm going to go back to the lightning in the bottle point. I think obviously it's not a good thing that everybody was this kind of like forced to the brink on this production. No one wants to make a movie where the director contemplates suicide and one of the lead actors has a heart attack and the other lead actor shows up very overweight and refuses to learn his lines. But if you're gonna have that movie, it'd be nice for it to turn out like this, because all those factors, in a weird way, kind of make the movie better. It's those this is movies like this are kind of one of the reasons that I understand why people go like, yeah, man, I'm not even gonna write a script, or yeah, man, I'm not even gonna like give my directors that, or my actors that much direction. I'm just gonna let them go, because this is proof that sometimes, once in a blue moon, if Martin Sheen gets really drunk and you just let him go, he's gonna do a bizarre, compelling dance and punch a mirror and actually cut his hand and have to go to the doctor afterward. And if your other lead actor shows up extremely overweight, you're gonna go, oh my god, what do we do? Okay, shoot him in the shadows. And that's gonna totally work way better than what you might have originally hoped for. I think everything that everybody is doing here, in the confines of any other movie, could quite possibly not work at all. I can picture these same performances being transferred to another movie and with the same direction or the same, or with different direction or different cinematography seeming silly or over the top. Like, I can think of a handful of other great directors whose style applied to that hotel scene would feel unnatural and stilted and overly performative, whose exact same style attached to Larry Fishburne's 14-year-old performance would leave him seeming like a real kid who doesn't really know what he's doing.
There you go. But that's it. That's this character.
Yeah, but it's the combination of all the aspects of the direction and the production here that make these performances work. I think I've heard actors that I've worked with or that I've considered working with say before that they don't like it when directors get blamed, even for bad performances, because they feel that it takes away a sense of autonomy from the actor. And the actor is the actor, and the director influences that, but the actor creates the performance. But I think movies like this are real evidence that the director has a lot more impact on performance and how performance is seen than any viewer may realize. To a layman, it might look like the director is just a guy who sits in a chair and shouts action and cut. But when it comes down to the line, the director is the one who's going to make you look good or make you look like a buffoon. And I think everybody looks good in this, much to the negative impact of Coppola's heart and mental health at the time.
Yeah. I think basically everyone was strung out on something except Robert Duvall, by the way.
Yeah. Especially
Lance
Dennis
says
Hopper.
that Dennis Hopper is all over the place, and there's a lot of footage again in the documentary that is like must see.
I do love, there's a cut in Hearts of Darkness where I think they go from like his character like rambling and talking about Kurtz, and Dennis Hopper comes on the soundtrack and goes, I wasn't in the best of shape. It's just a brilliant documentary cut.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And the scene where Lance, where the character says he's tripping on acid, and that's the actor's being interviewed, and he's like, yeah, I did some acid. In that scene, I was doing speed, though.
That makes it okay.
And he's like, yeah, all the time, man. Just marijuana, alcohol. We were not. Everyone's just going crazy, and it somehow works. And I'm talking in circles, but everything Zach said is true. And though I do think Brando was probably totally unprofessional, and what he did was just yet another crazy hurdle for Coppola, I think it turns out perfectly. Mm-hmm. I think we see, despite like he's maybe past his prime, he's out of shape. The degree to which he cares about the material is certainly unclear, but he's just so talented that when you pull out like the right 5%, that it's just so fantastic. And but I think my favorite character moment or sort of tendency comes from Duvall, where
the canteen.
Every time That was an excellent moment too. But I was thinking every time there's an explosion, and anyone shouts incoming, everybody ducks except him.
Yeah.
Even when it's like 10 feet away from him, he doesn't even flinch in the slightest.
Yeah.
He's like the perfect embodiment of sort of what the U.S. military like wants to be / kind of sort of should be, and is a really important foil to what we see Kurtz has become by the end of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I dream of being Robert Duvall one day. Lieutenant Colonel. Not to mention he's a lieutenant colonel and he kind of plays like an NCO kind of role, but it's like it doesn't matter. Like his super high ranking officer status doesn't mean anything. And obviously, yeah, I was going to mention the canteen thing was so perfectly casual. Like it wasn't oversold as casual. It just felt like literally Robert Duvall himself went over and just like did that and just let like the body, and that actor, by the way, great. I hope he's doing well. But yeah, I mean, Martin Sheen, he's got a nice face. He's got a nice face, Christian. You know what?
Yes.
You know, and yeah, in terms of Brando, you know, I never seen The Godfather.
Me neither.
He's really good in The Godfather. I think he's better in this, and I think Robert De Niro puts in more work as the same character in the sequel.
That doesn't.
Whether he's better or not is kind of up to interpretation.
Yeah.
He's freaking fantastic in Streetcar and Waterfront.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of those actors that basically says more when he's not speaking. And you're just grasping onto every word. And you literally are hearing it like it's gospel. Like he's giving his own religion about war at the very end. And you're like, it's not like a cultish thing. It's not like I said, nothing is oversold. Everything just feels like you're totally on board with whatever this guy is saying. Like he and we hear through the entire thing, all the small moments are between the actual like intense scenes are still intense in and of themselves when Sheen is narrating his life, seeing he did literally everything possible. And, you know, it's just, it's crazy. Like, and you're wondering, like, who is this guy? What does he have to say? And you just have every reason to just, if not just hear, but like believe everything he's saying. And it just makes the triumph over him even more compelling and impactful by the end.
Yeah.
But that's all I had to talk about. If you guys have any other final thoughts.
I mean, I think Apocalypse Now is a movie that's been talked about to such a great extent. And I think I've said, I could talk about it forever, but I'd be repeating things that a million other people have said. I do think it's worth watching more quote-unquote doomed movies and the documentaries that accompany them. This movie has Hearts of Darkness. Richard Stanley's The Island of Dr. Moreau, which was another movie where Marlon Brando really didn't do the work, has Island of Lost Souls, Ghost in the Noonday Sun, which I recently watched, has The Ghost of Peter Sellers. It's really fascinating to see these movies where everything goes wrong and how that either leads to lightning in a bottle or a great splattering mess on the carpet. And usually it's the latter. In this case, it was the former by many, many miracles.
Yeah. I think it's evident that this is a must-see. I don't think we've given a 5 out of 5, the three of us, to anything other than this and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, if I'm remembering right.
Yep.
So, two basically perfect movies there.
Yeah.
I guess my last comment might be like a quick lowdown on why on what's good about the Redux. The best added scene in the Redux is there's another scene with the Playmates where one of them is trying to emotionally connect with Lance, and she's sort of talking about how it's hard to be this symbol because she can't really have a conversation with anyone. And Lance isn't even listening to her. He's not even fulfilling the need that she's describing, but yet just him being there at all is like the closest thing she's gotten to someone listening to her. And it's deeply tragic and really, really good. It's an excellent piece of character work. But there's this long French plantation scene where a lot of the subtext of the film is just said out loud, and it totally disrupts the momentum of the boat's journey to Kurtz.
Yeah, that's the worst bit.
It's a huge detractor, and Coppola kept that in the final cut and did not keep the Playmate scene in the final cut, which is why I actually slightly prefer the Redux, because if you're going to have the added stuff, you might as well keep in the best of the added stuff. And there's also some more Kurtz stuff in the Redux and in the final cut, which I don't like, because they're in broad daylight.
Yeah.
He's in broad daylight, and you can see his physical iffiness more, and it's definitely more scripted than the improvised stuff that works really well. And it's, at the end of the day, the reason it was cut in the first place is because it's unnecessary. And the reason why Kurtz works so well in the theatrical cut is because it's so economical, and the only stuff that's left in is the perfect stuff. So I would say watch the theatrical. If you love it as much as we do, give the Redux a try to see it. Definitely watch the documentary. Go get it in 4K, man. Get friends. Have a crisis together.
Yeah.
Like,
Have a great
just go watch
crisis
it.
together.
Yeah, get friends. What are you doing with your life?
Yeah. Christian tells everyone listening to get friends. That's it. That's the tagline.
Why are you listening to us?
Yeah. Yeah. Apocalypse, not now, but
Wow.
forever. But wow, Apocalypse, wow. Apparently it was like based off of like some graffiti. I forget, maybe it was Coppola. It was Coppola, that name. Yeah. And he saw like it said Nirvana now or something, and he was like, yeah, we should name it that or something. I don't know what that means, but not the band Nirvana, but
Yes.
'cause that didn't exist yet, obviously. But yeah, go see this. You know, it's not really a war film. I think it's, you know, it's just big brain. You have to be big brain. I'm sorry, small
It's
brain,
true.
small and smooth brain. I don't know what to tell you, but this is pretty advanced, and also like anybody who's a fan of Vietnam history or anything. Also, you gotta shout out my homies. But yep, 5 out of 5.
All right. Weekend review?
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't even know what I'm talking about.
Mitchell, are you going to see Top Gun Maverick?
I'll take off my headphones.
Okay.
I'm taking off my headphones. Goodbye.
Because I know Christian has seen it. So this morning, my family and I went to see Top Gun Maverick, the long-awaited sequel to Top Gun. And it is good, and I had a lot of fun with it. I think the action in the original Top Gun is really well shot. I want to give that movie that credit, because I don't... people are split on Top Gun. I'm someone who thinks that it's kind of silly and not especially good, but other people think it's a lost gem and that people don't appreciate it for what it is. I'm not here to talk about that one. I think that the sequel, though, despite the quality of the action in that first one, I think the sequel is superior in action, and I think it's superior in heart. And that even comes down to dedicating the movie to Tony Scott, the director of the original, who died a couple of years ago at this point. It's not especially recent, but it feels appropriate for the film to be dedicated to him. I also like how Tom Cruise, and a couple of people mentioned this, finally made a movie about how he's not as young as he used to be. Tom Cruise is 60, and in this movie is all about how he's aging out of being this hotshot pilot, and he needs to teach other people to take on that position for him. It's all about his relationship to his sort of surrogate son. And for once, he has an age-appropriate love interest who isn't like half his age. Jennifer Connelly is only 9 years younger than him, which is not really a huge age gap at all when you're going from 60 to 51. Yeah, I mean, I think I was pointing this out to Christian. The climax of this movie, it pretty much just is the climax from A New Hope. They have to fly through a thin canyon to shoot missiles into a narrow port that's only a few meters wide, at which point they leave the canyon to finally shoot into the port. One of them's targeting computer breaks, and he has to use the advice of a deceased father figure to, get it done and save the day, at which point they're ambushed and a mysterious black uniformed villain takes aim at our heroes, only for a previously disliked cocky ally to fly in and save them at the last minute. So that was a little distracting. As soon as I noticed it, I just kept noticing more and more similarities. But that didn't take away from it. because as Christian pointed out to me, a lot of the imagery in New Hope is based on like classic war movies and aerial combat anyway. So Top Gun Maverick, it's a 4 out of 5 for me. I don't think it's this amazing pinnacle of modern cinema like a lot of people do, but it's definitely worth seeing in the theater if you can. More for the sound mix than for the visuals, if I'll be honest. The sound mix in this film at some points literally shakes the cinema, so I think it's worth seeing it for that alone, even though it is a pretty well shot film. The visuals aren't exactly what excites me as much as the action and the sound. But yeah, 4 out of 5. I'm going to signal that Mitchell can come back.
Waving me down, that's pretty ironic.
It's so good. I'll just say 4.5. I wouldn't call it a pinnacle of modern cinema, but I would call it a pinnacle of modern blockbusters. I really think it's special.
So the planes didn't just list around.
No, this was not the final countdown.
I'd say no.
Which, according to Christian, is the worst movie we've ever talked about on this
Okay,
show.
we are not. We're not.
We're not starting this. Okay, look. Paul Blart, Apocalypse Now. Only 2 movies you need. That's all I
And
have to
Zach,
say.
I'll have you know that when I made that list, it was before we published The Beyond. So anyway, I watched a Peanuts short called "Why Charlie Brown Why," examining leukemia in children.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
This is a heavy
You get the sense that it's more of an educational short than the others are. And I opened my Letterboxd review with, "This is dangerously close to 122L territory," because at the beginning it kind of is. Like they go to visit this sick classmate, and Charlie Brown is just like, "Are you gonna die?" And Linus is like, "Charlie Brown, what's wrong with you?" It's kind of bizarre, but eventually it kind of catches its stride. The Snoopy gags just feel so out of place because of how serious the rest of it is. But there's some really important conversations between Linus and other kids that don't really know how to process it. And I understand that this is like the first children's program to deal directly with cancer. So I guess from like a landmark perspective, it gets some points for that. I give it a 4 because I think it's dealing with a lot of heavy, unwieldy stuff, and in a way that other comparable things hasn't even attempted before. So just the bravery to even try to do that, I think, earns it points. And I kind of like the score. It's not Vince Guaraldi because this is from 1990, well after he was done doing these. But I think it's pretty neat and does what it can. Yeah, if I had like a little kid and I needed to explain cancer to them, I would probably use this because it's kind of an impossible conversation to have, and this does, I think, as well as it could.
Okay.
What happened to the Great Pumpkin Man?
It's still a 5 out of 5. That's what happened.
Is it? Wow.
I kind of struggled for the past like 3 minutes, like passively, as to what I was going to talk about. I'll talk about The Boys.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Time for me to take off my headphones.
I'm not going to spoil anything. Come back.
We'll wave to him. Or he can come back.
I'm not gonna spoil anything. I'm not. I won't even talk about nothing. I'll talk about nothing. Okay. No. So The Boys is a very interesting journey for me. I have these weird moments where I'm okay with watching like things that test the boundaries, and for The Boys, it's pretty much like the closest you can really get to like not even making fun of superheroes, just completely like slandering the fact that they exist and just like taking advantage of every possible terrible thing that they could do. And not only that, because that's really what the first season establishes, that once we actually get to like the character drama, and Anthony Starr is fantastic, and Carl Urban and Jack Quaid are fantastic, and oh my gosh, like they're all just so like diverse, interesting characters with different, like not only like the third season gets even more meta when it comes to the actual powers and everything, but for the most part, like Lance Alonso, Karen Fukuhara, Erin Moriarty's okay, but she's mildly dramatic. But every character is so intriguing. You can really latch onto everything, and Vought is such an interesting corporation that has multiple like cliches rolled into one. Basically, Giancarlo Esposito is just magnificent. Like every time he's on the screen, like he's so compelling and so interesting to hear from. Unfortunately, he's way better in this than in Mandalorian. Like after seeing him in Mandalorian, even though
really?
he is good in The Mandalorian, this kind of role as like a CEO, like a spokesperson and behind the scenes actor, like being able to verbally manipulate like the most powerful people on the planet is just like fantastic. And those conversations are awesome. But yeah, I'm on episode 5 of season 3, which just came out like yesterday as of this recording, and I'm very interested to see where it's going, and it really doesn't try to go on to the same gags when it comes to like, yeah, we're making fun of superheroes, we're making fun of corporations, and poking fun at politics directly, like literally naming senators in real life in the show, saying like they gave you a gift basket, Homelander, and it's just it's so funny, and it's occasionally I will say it does overstay its welcome with some things. Like, yes, I get it, it's ironic, and it's the gore is a little bit over the top, and certainly the sexual stuff is definitely oversold in some areas, but for the most part, for a TV show to carry this idea this long and to be this intriguing and introduce characters very subtly and really get like the drama behind them without like settling on too many cliches is very hard to do in this current environment that we're in with television and everything. I think it's a really interesting show. Definitely worth a try. If you're interested after season 1, I would suggest keep going, because it definitely, it's a great ride.
Yeah.
So
I'll get on it.
I'm waiting until all the episodes drop for season 3 to watch, just so I can watch it at my own pace. But I really like the first 2. I think I preferred the second one to the second season of the first, so that's always nice when there seems to be an upward trajectory. But is it time for Mitchell's Munitions Minute?
Yeah, how could I fit it all in 1 minute? I don't know.
Pew pew. Pew pew.
Yeah, pew pew.
Everybody. All right. Well, Mitchell has 60 seconds to discuss munitions and weaponry that he found interesting in Apocalypse Now. This is going to be the fastest you've ever heard Mitchell speak. All right, in 3, 2, 1, and go.
Hello, welcome to the Ben Shapiro Show. So today we're going to talk about the M16. No, I'm kidding. So the Colt Model 602, internally known by Colt, was the M16. It was the first ever derivative of the Armalite AR-15 adopted by the U.S. military. So it was basically transferred into a safe semi and auto select fire rifle. It generally performed pretty terribly because it was so mass produced, and there's a lot of criticism for jamming and things like that. It's chambered in 5.56. In the movie, they used 30-round magazines, which is technically historically inaccurate because they would have been using 20-round magazines at this time. And only later in the 70s would they be using 30-round magazines at all. But yeah, it's a standard issue rifle for the U.S. military. It was eventually phased out, but it was used for National Guard units and then later used for federal and local law enforcement. And you'll still see it today in a lot of modern militaries for some reason. I don't know why.
Okay, 2 seconds to spare. That was well done.
Wow.
Nice.
Well done, Mitchell.
Nice.
So, I guess we can go on to the Marvelous Cinema Tour.
How marvelous is it?
This week I finally reached Everest. What's the reverse of Everest? What's the worst that Everest could be?
Journey to the center of the earth with
yes,
the rock.
I reached the center of Earth. I reached hell. The horror! I watched Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Oh jeez.
Which is what I've said this whole time. This is the movie that I'm like, I am not looking forward to this. Because even when it came out, when I was not really all that into film, I was more into writing at the time, and I was sort of willing to be fine with a movie and even rewatch it the next day as long as I thought it was fun. Avengers: Age of Ultron bored me. I think it's and I don't necessarily think that's entirely Joss Whedon's fault, because I didn't love Joss Whedon's direction in the first Avengers film. I talked about how he's more of a television director and showrunner, and perhaps he's more comfortable with that medium, so Avengers kind of feels like TV in a lot of ways. But to his credit, this movie, the game has really stepped up. This movie is a lot more cinematic. He's experimenting with more cinematic aspect ratios, angles, lighting, blocking. But I know that he was really busy when this movie was made. So some part of me wonders how much of that is him and how much of that is the second unit and how much of that is the previs artists and how much of that is people who aren't him who shot it because he was busy having a panic attack in his trailer. Additionally, like, I think this is burdened by having to shove so much canon into it. This is the end of phase 2 of Marvel, I think. So this is where Kevin Feige is really starting to take, like, aggressive creative control, and they're trying to lead up to the Infinity Stones. And so it feels like they're trying to put so much into this movie to set up for later films, to the point that this feels, in a lot of places, less like its own movie and more like set up the movie. Because we get Vision in this film, we get the Infinity Stones in this film, we get Scarlet Witch in this film, and she and Aaron Taylor Johnson, who plays Quicksilver, who plays the worse version of Quicksilver, because X-Men gave us a far superior version like the same year, maybe the year previous, are fine. Like, I remembered Aaron Taylor Johnson being very bad in this movie, but he's not terrible, if I'm totally honest. But they feel like they have so little to do. And it's not that they're unimportant to the narrative, because they do need to be there. Like, they're essential to Ultron's plan. But I think it's that this bucket can hold 3 gallons of story. And there are 3 3/4 gallons of content that Marvel wants to put into this movie. So they're really muscling it in there, and they're sitting on the barrel, and they're trying to jam down the lid. And at some point, it's going to feel like something can't fit. And I feel like a lot of this story, like Hulk's romance with Natasha, Hawkeye's farm, the Romanov twins, the Infinity Stones, Vision, it just feels like too much. It feels like they're trying to put too much into too small of a container. And, I mean, Andy Serkis showing up for 15 minutes entirely so they can establish his conflict for Black Panther. It's too much. It's exhausting. It's a 2 out of 5. It's my new least favorite in the MCU. This bottomed out Thor and the Incredible Hulk for my least favorite.
That's crazy.
I do want to give James Spader credit, because I do think, despite the fact that a lot of the time he just kind of sounds like Robert California, his vocal performance as Ultron is pretty good. I think that's mostly because James Spader just kind of has a charismatic voice, so lending his voice to anything...
Everything Stark is about is sex.
is going to lend something to the character. But James Spader is good. This is a really small thing. Why does Ultron have lips? It really bugged me how Ultron's lips squash and stretch like human skin. Metal doesn't do that.
I'll tell you why, because James Spader was wearing his frickin' CGI suit, and they had dots on his face, and it lets them capture more of his mannerisms and his acting.
Yeah,
Sure.
Last of Us Part 1.
There's a lot of things in this movie, though, that feel like that, where it's like, they won't notice. Like, they're not really problems with the movie, but they're just little things that annoy me. Like, why do Ultron's lips move like they're flesh? Metal doesn't do that, and Stark isn't using nanotechnology at this point. Why do the Avengers speak as if they're communicating with each other through a comm system when nobody's wearing an earpiece? That really bugs me.
Hawkeye was self-aware. He was self-aware of everything.
Oh, man.
Haha, funny.
This is kind of rapidly descending into me just yelling, but I didn't like this movie.
So what you really need is a Redux cut of this that can actually fit everything.
I'm glad you mentioned Apocalypse Now.
Oh, no.
Because I wanted, as my final thought on this, and tying this into this episode, Apocalypse Now cost $31 million.
Oh, my lord.
Okay,
oh,
this is
my
a good
lord.
point.
Even
oh, my
accounting for inflation, That's like $120 million today. Avengers Age of Ultron cost $350.
Just to make Ultron's
Apocalypse-
lips move weird.
Apocalypse Now cost less than half of Avengers Age of Ultron. Thank you, good night.
And you haven't seen City Misproductions yet. Stay on your high horse for Briefcase Part 2. We better run the down. We better run the down.
We're getting into overtime.
Well, you know, this one certainly earned it.
Yeah.
So. Oh, crike. Zach, are you ready to start this one?
Yep.
Okay. We're dropping you right in, Mitchell.
I'm ready to
in
go.
3, 2, 1, go.
When the dark side overcomes the better angels of our nature.
4 to 5.
No method at all.
4 to 5.
The End by the Doors.
5 out of 5.
The puppy.
5 out of 5.
Helicopter Blades.
5 out of 5.
Ceiling fans.
4 to 5.
Saigon.
3 to 5.
Harrison Ford as Colonel Exposition.
3 to 5.
The Smell of Napalm in the Morning.
4 to 5.
Diegetic Wagner soundtrack. Jeez.
5 out of 5.
Lawrence Fishburne dancing to I Can't Get No Satisfaction.
5 out of 5.
Asking who the commanding officer is.
4 to 5.
Susie Q.
3 to 5.
Marlon Brando's scalp.
4 to 5.
The Vietnam War.
3 out of 5.
An assassin.
3 out of 5.
A Soldier.
4 to 5.
Neither an errand boy.
5 out of 5.
Sacrificial Cows.
2 out of 5.
The horror.
5 out of 5.
1 second.
Absent French
time.
Plantation.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Okay.
There's some really good ones left over.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Nice.
All right. Christian, I believe you're our next host.
Host me.
Yes. Next up, we will be talking about Good Will Hunting.
Nice.
One of 2 co-writing credits of Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. The other being The Last Duel, which we discussed in our Rashomon episode.
We did.
Funnily enough. Directed by Gus Van Sant, if I remember.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And also, probably most iconically starring Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And this is a very talkative, deeply felt feature that seems to have a lot of space to resonate with a lot of different type of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I look forward to discussing it with both of you.
All right.
Me too.
Great.
All right. See you on the battlefields, heathens.